And as a kid, I had a really rough childhood, so rough that if you take a test called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Test, I had a 9 out of 10. And with that, basically what that said, if you took that test today, a 9 out of 10 says that statistically I should be dead, homeless, or in prison, or some sort of addicted substance abuse user. I shouldn't be where I am today, which is somebody who has a family, 2 kids, and is seemingly has a great life. But as a kid, there were some things that I always say it takes a village to raise someone. And I had my parents who continued to instill great values in me despite their struggles. And even though we went through some very hard times and some dark nights and some scary times because of the drug use, the poverty, you name it, I still was able to manage to become somebody that broke the odds. And I look back on that and I always wondered, well, how did I do that? Why was I different? How did I break the cycle? How did I become something other than a statistic? And I look back on the breadcrumbs, and it was always the supportive community of teachers and coaches who provided hope and a way out and light at the end of the tunnel, that if I could just make it, just get good grades, just be a good human being, that there was going to be something on the other side of the adversity I faced.
Welcome to the Kindness Factor podcast, sharing life-changing personal stories of the transformational impact of deep kindness. Hosted by
Dr. Elia, the happiness doctor,
and Randy McNeely, Captain Kind Man. Good morning, my friends. Welcome to another episode of the Kindness Factor podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Randy McNeely, Captain Kind Man. On this podcast, we share transformative stories of kindness, because kindness delivers the love that reaches hearts and changes lives. And we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. And just as a quick reminder, it's a big help for us to be able to get great guests and expand our kindness reach across the globe if you'll take the time to like and subscribe to this channel if you're watching on YouTube, or if you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, if you'll take just a minute to stop by and leave us a review or even give us love through some stars. Thank you so much again for joining us today, and we look forward to introducing you to our next amazing guest. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Welcome to another episode of the Kindness Factor podcast. I'm your co-host, Randy McNeely, Captain Kind Man. My normal co-host, my other better half, I call it, my wonderful partner, Dr. Gorgoras, today is on his way to the happy land of Greece, so he is not going to be able to join us, but he will be back with us next week. But I do have the wonderful privilege of being joined by an amazing man named Justin Pickens. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about him, but then I'm going to let him get into talking about himself, because he's got much more interesting things to say about him than I do. But just so you know, Justin has been an educator. He's a PE teacher. He's been a football coach. I don't know if he still is. He's going to tell us that. He left education for a little while and went and did financial planning, took all the tests for that, and then decided to come back to education because he felt like he could make a much greater difference and have a bigger impact working with young people, and with the end goal, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Justin, but the end goal of inspiring them to be the best people that they can be and helping them to learn how to do that. And without further ado, I just want to say thank you, Justin, and welcome to the Kindness Factor podcast.
Randy, thank you for having me. Guests who are listening to this, I'm so excited to be here. I've been following Randy on LinkedIn for quite a while. So to get a chance to be on this podcast, so hopefully we can leave a ripple effect in some of your lives. And we just want to inspire, motivate, and encourage you to be the best version of yourself. And then for you to go show that kindness to other people so we can just create a better world. And I always say a better world full of positive ripple effects.
Well,
But
I appreciate that, Justin.
Yeah, of course. I'll get started on just who I am for a little bit. And that's a loaded question when you ask somebody, especially as they get older in years, because so much gets added to their story. But essentially, as a kid, I was a kid who grew up with 2 parents who were great and tried their best, but 2 parents who struggled with, mental illness. My dad specifically with anger and substance abuse issues. He was in and out of prison for methamphetamine use. And as a kid, I had a really rough childhood, so rough that if you take a test called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Test, I had a 9 out of 10. And with that, basically what that said, if you took that test today, a 9 out of 10 says that statistically I should be dead, homeless, or in prison, or some sort of addicted substance abuse user. I shouldn't be where I am today, which is somebody who has a family, 2 kids, and is seemingly has a great life. But as a kid, there were some things that I always say it takes a village to raise someone. And I had my parents who continued to instill great values in me despite their struggles. And even though we went through some very hard times and some dark nights and some scary times because of the drug use, the poverty, you name it, I still was able to manage to become somebody that broke the odds. And I look back on that and I always wondered, like, well, how did I do that? Why was I different? How did I break the cycle? How did I become something other than a statistic? And I look back on the breadcrumbs, and it was always the supportive community of teachers and coaches who provided hope and a way out and light at the end of the tunnel, that if I could just make it, just get good grades, just be a good human being, that there was going to be something on the other side of the adversity I faced. So I played sports all growing up. I had kind coaches and teachers. I went to college, and when it came time to choose a major, there wasn't anything else in the world I wanted to do but become a teacher and a coach, because those are people who I really looked up to. I did that for 13 years. I was a social studies teacher for 5, and then I jumped and went over to physical education for 8. I coached 3 sports: high school football, middle school basketball, middle school track. And I can honestly say, like, I loved every second of teaching and coaching. Now, there were some hard days, some struggles, some frustrating days, just like anybody had. But you heard this topic called teacher burnout all the time. And to be honest, I never really faced that. But after 13 years, I left teaching and I left education. And I don't know if anybody's ever felt this, but I was obviously swayed by money to go to financial advising. But more than anything, I reached this point in my career where I was like, is this it? Is this the best difference I can make? Maybe I'm better off if I have a job with more status. So for me, I always tell people I might have left for money, but the real reason I left is because I felt like a higher paying job would provide me with more status. And that's just something I always encourage teachers nowadays. You're never going to find more status than a generational positive ripple effect that you're going to leave in kids' lives. But I left, I went to financial advising. I passed all my tests. I did everything that I could to become a successful advisor. But every day something was eating at me, where I couldn't work with young people and I couldn't work with people that didn't have money. And that was the complete opposite of the story of my entire life. And it was really hard. And I went from being involved with 700 kids a day in the school and giving high fives every day to an office and 2 computer screens. So I got out of that and I was going to go back to teaching, but then I had coffee with somebody's friend and I was encouraged to try another path, which is completely opposite of the financial advising industry. And I went into fast food. And I explored what it would be like to work in and possibly try to own and operate a Chick-fil-A. And I will tell you, I have so much more respect for anybody in the service industry than I ever had before. But I also found out that I didn't want to be in the service industry, the restaurant industry. It's really tough. I'm the only former physical education teacher who taught students nutrition lessons and then hired the exact same kids to sell processed fast food combo meals and try to make them large sizes. So I always say that. But recently, as of November, there was a situation at Chick-fil-A where I was handing out food, and I just had 3 students back to back to back who I had taught 15 years ago in my first year come through the drive-thru, and they're 25 now, and every single one of them said, "I remember you. You left an impact on me." And one girl in particular had her 7-month-old kid with her. And she was just like, "Oh my gosh, it is so great to see you, Coach Pickens. I'm so glad you're here." And I had this epiphany where I was like, I was trying to make an impact with status and money. And I realized like I was making the biggest impact I ever would have made simply by being a teacher and a coach and somebody who was leaving these positive generational impact. And I know that that's easy on the other side to say that, but as somebody who teachers and coaches played such an important part in my life, for me to kind of forget that and leave teaching, now I just have a renewed sense of purpose. And Randy, right now, what I do is by day, I'm a Title I elementary PE teacher where I am helping, families that are just trying to make it, that are blue collar, that are trying to work and provide for their families. And I'm trying to teach kids how to be healthy and move and be kind and be a positive impact on their community. And that's what I do by day. And then by night, I've actually started my own motivational speaking business where I will go into schools and I'll speak to teachers and staff and I'll tell them my story. I'll speak to students. I'll speak to business owners and operators of how they can also be a difference maker and generational impact. And really right now I'm living out my calling, which allows me to be kind every single day.
That is tremendous. And I love several things that you said there. When you were working as a financial advisor, you realized that there was something missing and you weren't quite sure what. So then you went into the fast food industry and you weren't quite sure what. You thought status was going to do it for you. But when you saw those students and you interacted with them, you realized what was missing. You realized that you were missing what you had before, where you could see the light in their eyes. You could be with them and see the impact that you were having. And you realize, this is the impact I had. And I'm not going to try to put exactly what you thought into your head because you know what you thought. But in my mind, I would have been sitting there thinking, I had this kind of impact on these kids that are trying to make a difference. How am I having that kind of impact here? And I think about that because I had a high-paying, high-status job for a long time. I was in the information security world. And, for the longest time, I thought, what kind of impact am I having on people? When you work as an information security officer, you're the guy that everybody loves to hate. Nobody wants to talk about cybersecurity. Nobody wants to deal with that stuff, And so I would often have the conundrum, how am I impacting people or inspiring people to do better, be better, become better? And so I loved your story there, and I really appreciate that. Now, I want to hear a little bit more. I know that somewhere back there, you had a transformational experience, probably several transformational experiences, but is there one transformational experience that you could, with kindness, that you could share with our audience that you feel like would be of a help and uplifting to them? Hello, my wonderful friends. If you could step into the shoes of a kindness hero today, would you want to? I believe that most of you would, and here's an easy way to do that. Simply watch this little video clip by Kindness Worldwide, and if it resonates, stop by their website today, www.kindnessworldwide.org, and make a donation to support their wonderful mission to bring cultures of kindness to communities throughout the world. And then feel free to share it with your friends and family. Thank you for your support.
When a wallet was returned just moments after it was lost, a purpose was found. This one act of kindness inspired the formation of the nonprofit Kindness Worldwide to create a culture of kindness in communities throughout the world. Kindness Week Worldwide mobilized the entire community in York, Pennsylvania, featuring initiatives and playbook programs including blood drives, kindness cards, K-12 and college students embracing kindness, and an innovative means of community policing, kindness citations. If something so magical can happen in York, Pennsylvania, the same and other inspirations can happen anywhere and everywhere. Our Screen Scenes initiative featuring the Kindness Factor will showcase these many stories of kindness. Let's include your community among them. Kindness is the heartbeat of the world. Together, with your support, we can make all its hearts beat as one.
Of course. So you're right. There's been so many transformational moments I've had, and I've had more growth in the last 2 years than I might have had my entire life, especially with trying to find out who I am. But I'll go back to about 10 years ago. I had a mentor named Ron Peters walk into my life. And it was unexpected. I wasn't asking for it, but I saw what it looked like to be a man of substance and character and somebody who gave kindness every day. And the story basically goes, when I became a PE teacher, I was still young. I was still competitive. I still had this drive of I want my class to be a certain way. I want my sports teams to be in line, and I want them to be structured. And I that is success for me. And I was over the top sometimes. And 10 years ago, patience didn't come that easy to me, because if you look back at my childhood and how my dad acted with me, what came really easy was flying off the handle. What came really easy was raising my voice and using that to get attention. What didn't come easy was patience and breathing and giving great words of encouragement. So 10 years ago, when I went to a new school, I met a gentleman named Ron Peters, who was 60 years old, 58 at the time, and he was just cool as a cucumber. Nothing rattled him, nothing shook him, nothing made him get impatient. And that's where a lot of times when people become impatient, they feel like they have to get something done right then and there. They can lose their sight of kindness. And I just remember thinking, like, he's moving at his own pace. He's moving at his own time. He never gets flustered. The exact opposite of me. I had a goal. I wanted to get it done right then and there, and no one was going to stop me from getting my goal accomplished. But I would say over 10 years, I saw Ron Peters. He was a para-educator in my class. He had already retired, had his career. So he genuinely came back just to be a para-educator, and he was a 3-sport coach helping these young kids. And
Wow.
I can't tell you, it wasn't one act of kindness. It was every day watching Ron interact with the staff members at the school, interact with the students, interact with the parents. And every day when he would just bring so much joy to them with his demeanor, even though I felt like I was a successful coach and a teacher and my classroom was squared away, I just wanted what he had. And how could I give that away more freely? So it took a long time, and I'm still not perfect, but over 10 years of seeing this kind, compassionate, generous man interact with people on a daily basis, it eventually changed my heart to where I still am pretty high strung. I want things done a certain way, but it made me much more patient as a teacher. It made me much more patient with staff members I worked with than I was 10 years ago. And ultimately, it has given me the patience to work with elementary kids and be somebody who's going to be constantly uplifting them. And without seeing that day in and day out from Ron, an act of kindness can create a ripple effect, but seeing Ron do it every single day, it changed my life. And honestly, Randy, it has made me a better man, a better husband, and ultimately it's made me a better father to my 4-year-old and my 1-year-old. So Ron Peters is that one person for me who was the biggest spark of kindness that I had the daily interaction with.
Isn't it amazing how one good person's example can light a fire in our lives? And how many other lives have been impacted because he lit that fire in yours? It's not, your family has obviously benefited, the people that you've interacted, the students and things like that, but it's also impacted your speaking. It's impacted, every area of your life, like you just said. And all the people that have listened to you, if you get a chance, audience, and I'm going to put these links, his links to his website, to his uh, email, to his video. He's got a fantastic video, a speaker's reel is what I'll call it, but it tells a little bit about him. You get a chance to go and watch that, and you'll be able to feel, like you've been feeling from what he shared here, but you'll be able to feel even more the goodness of this man's heart. And you think, okay, if that person, Ron Peters had that kind of impact on Justin, Justin is turning around and giving that impact to a lot of other people as well. And Justin, we so appreciate that. And here's the question. And you kind of touched on it at the end. It helped you to be a better husband and father. How has that impacted how you feel toward your wife and toward your kids and how you've treated them. How has that helped you within the walls of your own home?
Uh, Randy, I'll just tell you a quick story. It's made me live in the present moment more often and more consistently. And what I mean by that is, like, my whole life I was a high achiever and I just needed to climb the ladder and get to the next step and get to the next level. And what it left me without any calm, steady time to just simply connect with people. And, a few years ago, 2020, we moved into a new house. And I'll just tell this story real quick. We have a neighbor who we share a backyard fence with. And this neighbor, we had a hole in our fence, and our neighbor, her name was, I'll call her Patricia for this, but our neighbor would go through the fence and she'd pet our dog every single day through like a hole in the fence. And over time, my wife would like kind of video it and say it was cute. And then my wife made a TikTok out of it and it got over 100,000 views. But one day I was just thinking, like, I don't know my neighbor very well. I'm so busy with work and with what goals I want to accomplish. I've never got to know her. So eventually we started talking through the fence, kind of like a home improvement show, or what was the name of it? Yeah, home with Tim
Home
Allen.
improvement. Him
Yeah.
talking over the fence to
And I got to know her story. And essentially what had happened was right before COVID, she was a caretaker for her mother, and Patricia was in her 60s. She was a caretaker for her mother. Her mother had passed away. And right when COVID had hit, Patricia was alone and by herself. And, for her to have that interaction with my dog, who I had gotten 10 years ago from a shelter, I just thought, wow, that's making a huge impact on her day. So, taking a sign from Ron to just live in the moment, there was one spring day I just decided, you know what? I'm going to cut a hole in my fence and I'm going to build a doggy door. And I did that. It took me like $15 to get supplies from Home Depot. And all in all, it took me like an hour of my time. And I will tell you, I built a swinging door that our dog could jump through. And we started sharing our dog named Crimson with Patricia. And to know that, like, Patricia at this time in our life needed our dog Crimson more than we needed her over time, because she was, alone by herself. It made me feel so great inside. And I will tell you that small act of kindness led to so much more, because now we don't just have a doggy door. We since have redone the fence and we have a full gate that stays open where we share our dog. But since then, in 2020, we've had 2 children since then who now have a second grandmother that they go to her house every single day. Susan will play with them. They love them. We don't have a second grandmother. We have another emergency babysitter if something comes up. And what started as just this small act of kindness has transformed our lives for the better. It's transformed Patricia's life. And it just started with me making a decision that I'm going to take 1 hour out of my day to do something that won't benefit me. And it did benefit me. It's the ripple effect.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And not that you do it because you want a ripple effect or you're seeking some sort of gospel prosperity. But really, when I tried to fill somebody else's cup, my cup was in return filled. So that's just one of those small acts of kindness that I learned from Ron, of living in the moment, taking one day at a time, and how can I serve somebody else?
It's interesting that you share that story. What a beautiful story, by the way. Thank you for sharing that with us. 2 lives, 4 lives, 5 lives that have been uplifted, inspired. And, I'm sure that Susan probably has family somewhere. Hopefully she does, or she'll share the kindness that you've given with other people. And now we're sharing that with our audience. It's something that makes me think of is the fact that by you being willing to take and do that small act was something small to you because it only took an hour. Small, you open the door, we're going to share a dog. All right, cool. The dog gets to run back and forth, and now our neighbor's less lonely. But by doing that, that little small act became a major milestone for both her and you, because of what, look at what happened. She's like a family member. You love her and she loves you and she loves your children. And you do have that. You've got that emergency babysitter, but you got much more than just an emergency babysitter.
Mm-hmm.
You got a friend, you've got another mother, another grandmother to your kids, and you're both receiving mutual benefit of love and caring and kindness that can only come by doing those small acts that open the door. And it's interesting metaphor. You did that small act to open the small door, and then what did it do? It ended up opening a big door. You build a gate because you wanted to open wide. You wanted to open more. There's a metaphor in that gate opening. You open wide, wider to love. And that's the beautiful thing that happens when we give those little acts of kindness. It opens hearts. It opens minds. It's open people's lives. And they're more willing to not only receive, but they're willing to give. The positive message that you sent wasn't just in words, it was in actions. You put out positive messaging to your neighbor. Said, hey, we like the fact that you are petting our dog. We recognize the fact that you're lonely. We like the fact that we can have the opportunity to share our dog with you. All those things, those positive messages opened her heart, opened your heart, and now they're opening the hearts of everybody that hears that story because it's powerful. It's inspiring. It reminds us of the fact that we can everybody, I'm wearing this red cape. And that doesn't mean I expect everybody to go around wearing a red cape. You don't have to wear a red cape to step into the shoes of a kindness hero. Through some simple act every day, we can step up and step in to the shoes of a kindness hero. And the beautiful thing is, with what you just shared with us, you became her miracle and she became yours.
Mm-hmm.
It's been joy and happiness that has been shared, and there'll be a lot more. And so thank you so much for sharing that. My goodness, we've sped through this. It's about that time when I'm going to ask you to think of and share 3 pearls of wisdom that you think would be uplifting and inspiring and be a help to our audience. You have 3 pearls of wisdom you can share with us, 3 nuggets.
Yeah, the first one I tell everybody, Randy, is you need an AM and a PM bookend. How do you start your day and how do you finish your day? Because when we talk about kindness, really, it's hard to be kind when you're constantly rushing and feeling hurried. So I always tell people, like, what are the first 30 minutes of your day and what are the last 30 minutes of your day look like? For me, if you're on your phone, you're going to feel more hurried, you're going to feel more busy and more anxious, and none of that leads to positivity throughout the day, at least at the level that it could be at. A lot of times kindness comes from being calm and still. So that would be one point of wisdom. What is an AM and PM bookend? For me, my AM bookend looks like waking up, unloading the dishwasher to some music, and then exercising. My PM bookend looks like, and I'm 36, but it looks like stretching with my wife for 25 minutes every single night to some calm and relaxing music. And that sets me up for success for the next day, gives me some quality time with my wife. So that's one, is just AM and PM bookend. The next one, I heard this from a Craig Groeschel podcast, but it's the 3-week rule. Reflect on the last 3 weeks of your life. Would you get rehired if you applied for your job again based on your performance in the last 3 weeks? Would your spouse want to marry you again based off your behavior in the last 3 weeks? Would your children want you to be their father based off your
Performance,
based off your interaction and performance? And then would people, if they spoke of you, would they call you and refer you as a kind person? Would that be one of the 5 adjectives they use about you based off your performance in the last 3 weeks? So sometimes it's just that mental clarity and that mental check. And then just, the last form of wisdom is pre-decide to be kind. Kindness is a muscle. And sometimes if you just think you're going to be kind in the moment, that does not happen all the time. You've got to constantly think about how I can build my kindness muscle up. And a lot of that comes with being pre-deciding. So every day in my elementary class, I say I pre-decide to breathe and not blow up on kids. Because the truth is, the 99 times I am a kindness machine to these kids can be decimated by the one time I allow myself to be agitated or unkind. So just to review, it's AM and PM bookends, the 3-week rule, and then finally pre-deciding to be kind, because kindness is a muscle and you've got to work on it every single day and be proactive in thinking about it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Justin, for sharing those with us. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today. So appreciate you. I could go on talking for a long, long time because I'm sure that there's a lot more stories you could share. And that means we're going to have you back again later. I just want to say thank you to our audience. Thank you for taking the time to take a few minutes out of your day and spend some time listening to this podcast. You didn't have to do that, but you did, and we appreciate you. And just a quick little reminder, after you've listened to this, take just a few minutes, take 5 or 10 minutes and stop and think, what did I learn? Or while you're listening, take some notes and then stop and think, what did I learn today? How is it applicable to me? And what am I going to do about it? And create a little plan about how you're going to apply what you've learned to your life. And I can promise you that if you do, and as you do, it'll make a difference. And as we always say, as we finish up, as you go throughout your week and throughout your life, remember that with kindness, everybody wins. Thank you for joining us.